You watched all the playoff games this weekend, not just obviously the Chargers, but what were the threads? What stood out as common threads throughout this playoff weekend?
Good to be a home team, and I thought the teams that we were worried about rest or rust, throw that out the window. Rest won. Getting your guys healthy and fresh and fast. The Rams were a great example of that. A lot of those teams that the Eagles had rested up, they were by far the more physical team in that contest.
If you could be a consultant for John Schneider and Mike McDonald right now, they flew DJ in. Said, DJ, I want you to consult us in the offensive coordinator hiring process. What are some critical keys?
Offensive coordinator, I just, first and foremost, just have some clarity. Know exactly what you want it to look like. I always get a little bit nervous when you come in and you're like, well, we can do a little of this, and we're going to take a little bit from here and a little bit from there, and we're going to blend all these things together. I want you to have a very clear vision of what that looks like based on the personnel that we have on our roster, and you can paint that picture very clearly. I want you to, as an offensive coordinator, to show me how we're going to marry run and pass. And I think the great offenses, and there's a reason why so many of them have just come out of the Shanahan system, because they do such a good job of marrying up their run game with their pass game. Those should not be two completely different entities. So those are things, that's a question I would definitely, want answered as you come through and try and find that right guy. And then someone who can develop a relationship with the quarterback as well. I don't think you can just be kind of a brainiac who's just, calling plays and has no, personal skills to be able to, have a good feedback relationship with your quarterback.
That's going to lead us to the four guys whose names we have now in a moment. But since you mentioned the Shanahan system, I thought I'd ask you what I asked Brock yesterday, because this quote from Matt Hasselbeck a couple weeks ago on the show is like sticking with me, and I can't quite get it out of my head. He said that a lot of that if you're trying to decide on, do you want to be a zone running team like the Shanahan stuff, or if you want to be a gap run scheme, that there are a lot of folks around football who just think zone running is soft.
So, even with the runs, what kind of runs? Some people view zone schemes as soft. For whatever reason, they got a hang up with it. And they view gap schemes, double teams and pulling guards, as tough.
Where would you stand on something like that?
Well, I would say, first of all, Shanahan, McVay, they've adopted a lot of gap scheme runs, and because of that, they've gotten a lot bigger. I think that's the reason why you would say they were maybe be viewed as not as physical, because if you're going to be a pure zone team, that's going to require a lot more athleticism up front. It's just kind of bulls on parade. Everybody's got to be able to really move laterally, whereas gap scheme, you can play with a 330-pound guard. I think what McVay figured out as they revamped their offensive line in Los Angeles was, okay, they were successful in their run game. They were running it well with their zone runs, but they were also getting their teeth kicked in the pocket, because those lighter interior guys that could really help you on some of those zone runs, they can't anchor down and form a firm pocket. So he was like, okay, we're going to get bigger. We're going to get bigger interior guys. We're going to run some more gap scheme runs, and then what that's going to do is going to set up more of an interior wall in pass protection, which more and more teams are building their pass protection inside out instead of the way we always did it outside in.
All right. If you cross paths with any of these four known candidates, we know there have been some other names that haven't gone on the public record. But, DJ, I'm curious if you've ever crossed paths with any of these four. Thomas Brown, formerly of the Rams, now with the Bears and looking for a job. Grant Udinsky, who's out in Minnesota, just a fascinating kind of guy. Hank Fraley in Detroit is their O-line coach, and Clint Kubiak, that's been around a few different spots. Ever crossed paths with any of those four, or any of those names generate maybe more intrigue and interest to you than others?
Yeah, Hank Fraley, I was around with the Browns many years ago. He was playing. So he was a classic example of a bad body, good player. He was just kind of he was a little sloppy looking, but he was so physical and so tough, and he was beloved in the locker room. He was definitely one of the leaders of the team. Not one of the best players on the team, but one of the leaders of the team. And I know the brand of football he believed in and how he played, and obviously you can follow around where he's been and what he's done. Physicality is going to be a big part of whatever he brings.
Well, you've just added further fuel to that Fraley tank that I think Salk and I are both super excited about.
I'll just tell you where I'm at right now. Just listening, we talked
Okay.
to people in all of these cities. We went to Chicago, and it's hard to get too excited about Thomas Brown, just partly because of how the end of this year went, and maybe that's unfair because he kind of got over-promoted, but that one was a little harder to get excited about. It's hard to get excited about Clint Kubiak. Because of some of the problems in Denver and then, the way it went in New Orleans, and it feels a little retready, even though he's a young guy. And then when you hear everything about Fraley, it just sounds awesome, except for the fact that doesn't an offensive coordinator also have to coordinate the passing game and work with quarterbacks and all those things? And so he, to me, feels like the leader in the clubhouse, at least in terms of everything we've heard for what Mike McDonald wants. But how concerned would you be about someone who's really just been an O-line coach coming in and doing everything that's required of a modern offense coordinator?
Well, I think he's going to have to hire his weaknesses, and hire around him on staff what passing game coordinators, quarterback coaches that can help frame the rest of that. And in terms of play calling, would be that would be interesting. I would imagine it would be a little bit more of a collective where he'd have control of the run game, and maybe allow for a little more input in the pass game. But I would be shocked. I would be shocked if he came in and said, "I have a mastery of the passing game, and I'm gonna,
Well, and he hasn't. Even more than that, he's already said, sort of like the whole story of Sean McVay coming in with Wade Phillips ready to go as a DC. He sounds like he's already reaching out to people to be potential partners and be a passing game coordinator, which is great. Does that person need to have experience, or could it involve someone like this other kid that they're talking to today, Udinsky, who's 28 years old, but seems to be the most interesting man on earth? I don't know if you know anything about him, but
no.
Oh my gosh, the way Kevin O'Connell talks about him is insane. Photographic memory. He's,
master mechanic. He hikes in the Alps for weeks on end with only his backpack.
He said interviewing him to be his chief of staff a few years ago was like interviewing someone who could take apart a car and put it back together to work at a car wash. Like, he's just that kind of smart. And then when he's not being smart about football, he's hiking the fjords in Norway. Like, he's just that kind of guy. Can you pair a really smart, inexperienced 28-year-old with someone like Hank Fraley?
I think you could. I think it's a fun marriage, to be honest. It's you could say, what was it that David Shaw used to call Stanford was intellectual brutality, where you can have the intellectual be the passing game part of it and the brutality be the run game part of it. I've seen those marry up together. So I don't see why that couldn't work as long as they got along. Personally, maybe. I know one thing. Fraley's going to need a big backpack if he's going to go hiking for a long period of time.
Yeah, that's a big boy right there. Big boy.
Yeah.
Hey, what's going on right now in these NFL franchises? Take me into your old life of working in that building, in scouting, in personnel, and everything else. Seahawks season has ended. Obviously, priority here to find your offensive staff and coordinator and everything else. What else is happening behind the scenes during this time while the playoffs are still ongoing?
Well, you're jamming on free agency. You got your pro department and all the guys who are in the building in Seattle. You've been watching these guys throughout the year, but now you're really firming that up. You're starting to have some meetings, trying to think about shaping a draft board. You're almost you're putting your dollar signs and your monetary value on free agents of kind of what who you like and who could be interesting to you. So getting that firmed up. You've got the college all-star games that are kicking off. They're already going on right now. So you got some college scouts out at those, getting a chance to watch those guys, and more importantly, to visit with them and talk with them and get some more background. And we got the big ones coming up, East West and Senior Bowl at the end of the month. So that's you're running on two different tracks there, the free agency track as well as the draft track. And then you're also if you've made staff changes, coaching staff changes. You've got guys coming in, more than likely you got some guys coming in and out of the building for visits on that front.
It's going to be the best Senior Bowl, DJ, that I can remember. I was chatting about in our little Blue 88 segment, and maybe obviously because it's all quarterback driven, but it feels like some of those guards that you mentioned from Georgia and Alabama and some of the big boys are playing. You've got 6 QBs, not 1 or 2, but all 6 of these QBs got to try to make a case for themselves. It feels like Jim Nagy down there, old Seahawk guy that we know pretty well, has put together maybe his best crew that I can remember down in Mobile.
Yeah, and if you're interested in more about that, we shot the roster reveal show with Jim on Monday, and that comes on NFL Network, I believe, Thursday. I think it's tomorrow that'll air. So that'll be out, and you can see we go through each of the different positions and highlight some guys. We also had Jackson Dart on, and it was great to visit with him. He's excited about the opportunity, the Ole Miss quarterback, to go down there and try and make an impression as well. So it's my favorite week of the year. I don't know if you're like a diehard just football junkie and you want to do something really cool, go to the Senior Bowl. You might think like, what? Come on, a college all-star game? Let me just tell you, you go to the Senior Bowl, and Mobile is not big. Where you go get a sandwich at lunch, you're going to be there'll be 4 NFL head coaches sitting at the table right next to you, and everybody's kind of relaxed, and it's cool, and you get to see the best college players in the one-on-ones go up against each other. It's just like it's a great week for football.
Brock and I were debating or discussing really more the other day the importance of mobile quarterbacks, and I'm a big fan. I love quarterbacks that can run, and in this day and age, I feel like you're really missing out on a huge part of the NFL experience and offense, what you can do without a mobile quarterback. But Brock actually kind of put it in a new way to me, saying, well, what about in the red zone more specifically, and all the problems Geno had in the red zone this year? And we just kind of went through and looked at, the top 7 or 8 teams in red zone offense. And other than the Lions, who had an unbelievable running game and were a bit of an outlier, it was Lamar, it was Josh Allen, it was Caleb Williams, it was Jaden Daniels, it was Bryce Young. Like every one of the top touchdown percentage offenses in the red zone had either running quarterbacks or an offensive line and running game that was head and shoulders above everybody else.
Here's a way I would explain that too, is that if you go play pickup basketball and there's only 9 guys in the gym, and you play 4-on-5 full court, the team with 4 guys, you're still going to be able to get up and down and score because there's speed, there's space, and there's going to be opportunities for you. Now, you take those same 9 guys, and we're going to bury them down in a half-court game of basketball. You're playing 4-on-5. It becomes very hard. And when you have an athletic quarterback who can move, all of a sudden now you're playing 5-on-5, and that changes the math down there.
And it's opening up read option, and it's opening up some of the play action
extending
stuff,
plays,
and creativity.
Yes.
So how hard would it be for Geno to improve on some of the red zone struggles from this year?
Well, you just mentioned the team that doesn't have this, the super athletic quarterback down there, and that's Detroit. So what does Detroit do? They have such a dominant offensive line, and they 3rd and 4 is not necessarily a guaranteed pass down because of how good they are in that aspect of the game, and it takes all the pressure in the world off of the quarterback. So I don't know that asking Geno to really want to run around a lot more, if that's the answer. I think the answer might more be let's really invest in this offensive line, this interior, this offensive line, and become more of a viable threat to make that part of his job a little easier.
Yeah, I think Football 101 tells you down there, and just watching it for all these years, and even back to playing as DJ did too, like you either play on time right away, and you'll see this in the red zone. Like that throw is on time, and it's ripped, and it's on rhythm, or you've got to create. And those QBs that can't create, it becomes very problematic. And why I think most of the top offenses scoring touchdowns had mobile guys, Salk, because if it wasn't on time and on target, then you got to create, expand, extend, run, do all those things those guys were able to do.
Well, you know what I would also be curious if you went through those teams that you mentioned, because I know just off the top of my head, the 2 you mentioned were like Baltimore and Buffalo. How are the tight ends for those teams too? Because that is the area of the field where we're having a stud tight end.
Is there any chance?
Baltimore's case, a couple of them.
Any helps. Chance that tight end is going to be available? The kid from Penn State at 18.
Oh man, if he is, the team that I call games for at 22, I'll be begging them to trade up to 17 from 22.
Yeah,
he is so good, man. I have my top 50 in the mock draft stuff that comes out, I believe, the 24th. So it's not that far away.
Last 2 minutes, because I texted you before the show and said, hey, man, if the Seahawks could steal one attribute of each of the 8 remaining playoff teams, either on the field, off the field, something you know about these 8 organizations that are left standing, and if the Seahawks could just steal one component of it into 2025, what would it be? You will start it. Go either way.
Can I
Anywhere
rip
you
through
want to start. Yep. Go ahead.
I like Brock gives me homework. And I get to work on my homework assignment here. So Detroit. I'll rip through them. Detroit would be alignment, and that's alignment from Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell of how they wanted to construct this team from the ground up. So I'd said alignment with them. Washington, I wrote down the value of veterans. A lot of people poo-pooed the veterans that they brought in. Some of them thought they didn't have much left, but they found value in putting a veteran leader in each of those position rooms. Philadelphia, I put down proper priorities. They will invest in the offensive and defensive line every stinking year. No matter how good they are or how deep they are, there's never enough. With the Rams, I wrote down details. This is one of the more detailed groups. It's detailed in how they run routes. It's detailed in how Les Snead goes about trying to find players that fit what they do. They're buttoned up when it comes to details. Kansas City, I wrote down continuity. When you have continuity of play callers on both sides of the ball, quarterback, general manager, that continuity, they can continue to grow. It's the whole New England Patriot model. Just have the continuity and let it rip. Houston, I wrote down aggressive. They've been aggressive in how they've done the draft. Think about trading all the way back up for Will Anderson. Think about the aggressive move to trade Deshaun Watson. They are not scared to take a big swing. That's worked out for them. Baltimore, I wrote down identity. It's to the point now where if you're a Baltimore Raven fan, you could put the draft board together because you know who the Baltimore Ravens are going to like. They know exactly who they are. And then with Buffalo, I put the ability to retool. The ability to recreate yourself. They've morphed and changed that roster around a little bit. They've lost some talented pieces, but they've been able to just keep it without losing any ground. They've been able to retool their roster, which I think is more. It's definitely a difficult thing to do.
Man, that's better than your 6 interception recall. That is good stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That was 8 for 8.
Kind of dig that.
How much more?
But I don't know. What do you guys think? I mean, I think you can look at all these teams, and it's a great assignment because
it's funny that the Washington one's a funny one, right? Like you went veterans, but like what's kind of pushed them over the top? The rookie quarterback who's unfreaking believable.
But that's a unicorn,
right?
Yeah, a unicorn.
Baltimore, you're right, and everything makes sense, but also like just the power and speed combo of Derrick Henry and Lamar is so ridiculous that it's overwhelming at times, right? I mean, I loved every one of your answers, and I feel like you could give ones that were totally different for all of those. I will say a bunch of the best quarterbacks in football, though, are going to be playing here in the last couple of weeks of the season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I look at that as there's that's the price of admission, right? Like, it doesn't tell you how good your seats are going to be, but you cannot get into the concert unless you have a quarterback. That gets you into this conversation. Now, if we assume they all have that quarterback, then now what is it about them individually that's made them work within this tournament? Because there are still some good quarterbacks who aren't playing right now. So it doesn't guarantee you. I think you need a good quarterback to go far, but having a good quarterback does not guarantee you that. That movement.
This is good. Great week. DJ, sounds like it'll just be you and me next week. Maybe we'll find somebody fun to hang out with you as well. But we appreciate all of your time, energy, and homework. We will talk to you next week.
I appreciate it. I appreciate all of your listeners for their Roki Sasaki prayers as we come down to the end.
Oh, he's going to San Diego. I believe that fully.
He's going to the Dodgers. I think this is all a dog and pony show.
I don't think so.
Him around. And he's just going to go to the Dodgers.
I think he's going to be a Padre.
Those guys.
I think he's going to be a Padre. There goes Daniel Jeremiah. We talked to him.